How often do you engage with other people in what you would consider to be critical thinking? And then you get to a point where you say, wait, hang on, I got to figure some stuff out on my own.
Yeah, and I say late high school because that's like...
How many of your friends are critical thinkers?
I would say most of them are critical thinkers.
Yeah, and but that's the way it should be, right? You put 3 students in a room, you have 50 or 100 opinions, right? This is the idea.
Yeah, in my opinion, I'd rather everyone have opinions and just stick to what everyone's saying and not come up with something of their own.
How about critical thinking in Penn State? How much are you really engaging in critical thinking at Penn State? Today, I want to talk about critical thinking. So, what one of you can start? What's critical thinking? When you hear that term, what is that?
I would say it's putting a bunch of problems together and then coming up with a solution.
Putting problems together, coming up with some kind of solution.
I was thinking of putting multiple solutions to solve one single problem.
A lot of solutions to solve one single problem. Dude, okay, both of those. That's very cool. Okay, I like that. Yeah.
I was going to say that when I think of, at least what I try to do when I, try to think critically about things is putting biases aside and feelings aside and trying to stay objective about things.
Okay.
And drawing conclusions from that.
Okay. All right, that's cool. I like that. Biases aside. So what when you think about critical thinking in yourself, your own development and growth, what do you think? What comes to mind?
I was thinking just putting up a lot of your experiences in life, come up with that solution, use different perspectives from what other people might think, what I would think, and then to solve that problem.
How often do you engage with other people in what you would consider to be critical thinking?
I would say definitely in classes, in college, I would say there's critical thinking when we're talking about hard discussions, but I would also say there's critical thinking when it comes to politics and religion and friendships.
Do you consider yourself a critical thinker?
I would say I weigh out the problems and I try to critically think, at least not jump to conclusions fast.
Meaning that before you jump into something, you take a step back and say, what?
Yeah.
What do you say to yourself?
Why am I doing this? For what am I doing this for? Pros and cons. I'm a big pro and con person.
I'm constantly critically thinking.
Yeah? What makes you say that?
Because even when I'm speaking right now, I am going through my brain step by step thinking what I should think, when I should even breathe. I would say that was critically thinking.
When I think about critical thinking, I tend to think about more of a discussion, so less a daily task type of thing, but more when I'm talking to people or reading something on the news or that's when I feel and other people tend to use critical thinking, and that's how I kind of perceive that.
So were you taught critical thinking? First off, let me ask you this question. How much critical thinking was happening in your family? Let's say around the dinner table.
I personally did. I don't think I did a whole lot growing up. It was more of a learned behavior kind of.
Where'd you learn
after it's hard to say. It wasn't one event or something. It was more I would say late high school. I'm starting to become an adult and everything, and I starting to pay attention more to things that I see on TV and in the news and everything. And so I used to just kind of agree with whatever my parents told me because I trusted them, my parents and everything. They know what's best for me and all that.
And then you get to a point where you say, wait, hang on, I got to figure some stuff out on my own.
Yeah, and I say late high school because that's like kind of the point in your life when you start, gaining your own independence and everything, and stuff like that. So having the full picture of things is a lot more important, and so I just kind of started paying a lot more attention, and I was like, okay, but kind of back to that being objective about things, I sort of told myself, okay, when I hear something, I need to kind of just wait a minute and like try to get all the facts, try to compare everything
Okay.
to the best of my ability, and then make a
right.
decision from there.
Okay.
I think for my family personally, when we're at a dinner table, we don't really talk to each other. We're rather watching the TV, we're watching like people eat things on YouTube, cooking shows and stuff like that.
You mean like mukbang or
Yeah,
something?
and then like
Wait, you're watching mukbang while you're eating?
yeah, I think it's really appetizing. So
Well, it kind of is in a way, right? All right. How many of your friends are critical thinkers?
I would say most of them are critical thinkers.
Yeah, and because if you watch our videos in Social 118, you know that I'm trying not to impose my own belief system onto students. That what we're trying to do in this classroom, in this space right here, is to give students opportunities to think on their own terms and to understand the ways in which ideas and thoughts that come at them are often slanted in one direction or another. Our sponsor this semester, our very first sponsor, is Ground News. It's the perfect sponsor for this class, and I'm really happy to endorse them, and I'm happy to get behind them. If you subscribe for Ground News, using the code in the description, the link in the description, you get 40% off the Vantage plan. That's the plan that we use in here. And I can't say enough how important this is and how valuable it is to have a better understanding of the ways in which news is coming at you and the ideological perspectives that people are taking who are sharing the news. So sign up for Ground News. It's awesome. Like, I hope all of my students sign up for Ground News, actually.
Because when we're engaging in conversation, they would respond after thinking what I said most of the time.
Uh-huh.
So that would make them a critical thinker.
Okay. Hey, Charlie, wait, how about you, man? Because you're Jewish, right? So, like, critical thinking, part of Judaism is, a core part of Judaism is thinking critically and arguing. You argue with other people, you argue with God, you argue with everybody.
True. I would say growing up, I was really taught to think, I critically think. I was taught to make my own decisions based off what was presented in front of me. So yeah, there is a lot of thinking, I would say, within my family. Well, my dad's Catholic, actually, so my mom and my dad, like, they made the discussion, they chose to raise us Jewish, but it was ultimately a personal choice for us. Like, do you want to keep going with Hebrew school? Like, do you want to become a bat mitzvah? Like, do you want to do these things with your life? And ultimately, my twin brother and I were like, yes, we want to. And we kept going. And keeping going really helped me continue my thought and, like, come up with opinions that weren't forced upon me. I was able to make them myself.
It's such a big part of Jewish culture to argue. This is the Talmud, the Torah, to argue, right?
Yeah, it's all about coming up with opinions, your own interpretations, like, and just like all around. So like, I'm a Reformed Jew. There's obviously, like other religions, there's tons of different sectors, and there's Orthodox Jews, there's conservative Judaism, there's all these types of Judaism. So Reform Judaism is really about making your own opinions. So you take in the Torah, you take in the stuff, and then you come up with your own opinions.
Yeah. No, it's pretty cool. Well, that's where they come up with this idea. So you put like 3 Jews in a room, you have 100 opinions or whatever. There are many variations of that. But that's the way it should be, right? You put 3 students in a room, you have 50 or 100 opinions, right? This is the idea.
Yeah, in my opinion, I'd rather everyone have opinions than just stick to what everyone's saying and not come up with something of their own.
Yeah, no, this is the thing, right? This is critical thinking. You argue, and in Judaism, right, you're arguing with God. So like, a lot of people would say, Muslims, other Christians would say, well, you can't argue with God. But, if you're Jewish, the whole point is to argue with God, and we should be arguing with God because, God creates this thing. My wife always says, it's crazy, right? We get put here and there's no operating instructions. And so for me, for example, I've had a lifetime of arguing with God. That's all I do is argue with God. And, she's like, sometimes I'm discussing, but a lot of times I'm arguing, and she's okay with it. It's good. She, by the way. God's got to be a she. Hey, so I have a question. How about critical thinking in Penn State? How much are you really engaging in critical thinking at Penn State?
I think when people walk on the sidewalk really slowly, they're not critically thinking.
How about, okay, that's one, but how about in your classes? How about think about most of what you do in your classes. How much of it is really critical thinking?
I would say not much.
And why would, what?
A lot, well, in my experience, a lot of coursework tends to be just kind of a professor giving a lecture and you taking notes on it or whatever. Sometimes you'll have like in my physics classes, we'll do like recitations where we kind of work through problems conceptually. So I would say that would be like in a group, that would be conceptual thinking or critical thinking. But a lot of the time, especially in like gen eds and stuff, it's just kind of, you're just kind of there.
Yeah, with every class, really.
Yeah.
You're just taking information.
You're just kind of, yeah.
You're putting it in notes and you memorize it for exams or whatever.
Yeah.
Robin, how about you, man? How much critical thinking are you doing?
I think in a lot of my classes, I am doing the critical thinking.
You're doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, like, for example, I'm an economics major. So when we're learning the theory and like the professor is doing their slides, that's when I'm not really critically thinking. But when they ask, like, if you apply it to this situation,
Yep.
like, for example, like a modern situation, like with like the tariffs or like trade and everything like that, then if you apply it then you'll have to start critically thinking.
Are you doing critical are you engaged with thinking critically because that's who you are, or more because it's demanded of you in college?
I think there is a mix of both. Because I don't think every student in class would be critically thinking when the professor asks, like, if you apply it to current economics,
No.
if you would, like, how would you think what would happen in the future or things like that.
Yeah.
But then I would say, like, some students also do think, like, what would happen and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Charlie, how about you? How much critical thinking has happened here versus at, religious school, right?
I would say definitely with just like the gen eds I'm in right now, lack of critical thinking.
What's happening in your gen ed classes?
Not a lot. It's a lot of being talked to, and then you write the notes, and then most assignments are just off the notes that were in class or stuff you read. So not a lot of it's opinion based, which I think is a lot of critical thinking is opinions and stuff like that. Because
a lot of what passes as critical thinking is opinions.
Yeah.
What passes as? Because critical thinking is not.
It's like
opinion.
science and facts, I feel like, but.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of things. You're taking a lot of things and
putting a lot of things together. But for like some of my classes, there's more opinion work, and I think that's where critical thinking actually starts to show, and I get to do more of it.
Do people challenge other people's opinions? I mean, how often are you seeing people?
Most of my classes are probably 200 people. So the one class I had that was like 20 people, I guess we had a couple different opinions, but still, like, I'm in really big lectures. So you're not really challenging these unless I've had 2 labs for my classes. So I guess a class that really shows this was Bi-Sci 3, which a lot of people take. It's a pretty popular gen ed. And that's a class where where you're meant to have opinions and you're meant to come up with stuff. And we have lab on Fridays or Thursdays, and that's
You're meant to think outside
yeah.
the box.
You put your phone away, you come up with answers, you're honest, you're open, and I think that's where the critical thinking is. But I don't think it's in classes any more than 100 people.
Yeah, how is that? Well, first off, y'all are paying a lot of money for your education, and unless you're kind of pushing it on your own, you're not like you are, right? Like you guys are at some level. If you're not doing it on your own, you're just taking in information, spitting it back out, and getting your degree. And
I think it's really easy to be a body, like in this school. You can just be a person who goes to class, does their work, gets fine grades, but doesn't have an opinion and doesn't participate. And I think that's when you're not getting your money's worth unless you're participating in stuff the school has to offer. You're being a body in class. You're, I guess, volunteering, or you're actually looking up from your seats right now, and you're not dozing off and going on your phone.
what would be the ideal thing to have happen for people who are sitting in this room? We're talking about critical thinking.
They have a new idea at the end of class, and they have something that motivates them, or they simply got through an hour and a half of lecture and they're not bored.
No, yeah, okay. Okay, all right. Robin, how about you? Like, what if you were sitting out there? You're up here now, but you could have, if I hadn't chosen you today, you'd be sitting there. What would you be doing?
I would be thinking how I would be responding to these questions and how I might engage in this conversation.
How would you know that you're not just lying to yourself or just making something up? Because you want to be, we all want to think we're smarter than we are. We all think we're smarter than we are. You should know, this is actually really valuable, everybody, that when we ask people to rank themselves on different categories, like, so for example, how to compare yourself to all of your peers at Penn State, where do you rank yourself in terms of your ability to get along well with other people? Are you above average or below average?
In Penn State, I would say
Penn State. Yeah.
I would say below average, to be honest.
Okay, all right. How about in the world?
I'd say average.
What would you say? Yeah, just the world. Compared to your peers. How about this? Just compared to other people.
I think that I would get along well with other people, but I'm not sure if they would get along well with me.
I would say something very similar. I think I am able to get along with and coexist with people pretty well. I can't say the same for others, though.
Oh my God. This is actually pretty cool, y'all, by the way. And a part of this is because you have microphones. And one of the reasons I love doing class like this is because when you have the microphone, you have to stop and think. Like, you really stop and think. The data are that 98% of anybody to whom we ask that question will say, I am above average. Not only am I above average, but something like 3 out of 4 people will say they're in the top 10% of the ability to get along well with people and engage other people because I'm just so wonderful, right? This is why I'm asking you about critical thinking. Like, what would you be doing? And you're all saying, like, yeah, I think, did I ask you? If you were in here, what would you be doing to ensure that you were thinking critically?
Well, to that, I was going to say that, kind of building on what they said, at least, like, particularly with something like this, it takes some level of, like, I guess the word would be passion. So, like, if you don't care at all about what's being lectured about, then you're not going to probably pay attention or enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, but, okay, but let me push back on that. I think it's really easy to care about a lot of things, but you could be really passionate about many, many, many things, but you walk into a classroom and let's say we're going to talk about, I don't know, the future state of the planet. And, I come in the classroom, I'm like, oh my God, and here's these 3 instructors. They come up and they're going to teach, they're going to talk. We're going to talk about the future state of the planet. Man, bro, the planet, right? Ask this guy, this is a big deal. The planet. You got billions upon billions upon billions of planets, and we're going to talk about the future state of this one, which you're not even sure exists once you get into astrophysics, right? And so I walk in here, and I'm sitting in the class like, dude, we're going to talk about the future state of the world. And then you guys start droning. You put slides up. Okay, start taking notes. You start droning on. And like, the passion goes right out the window, man. And well, it should. And well, it should. You come here, imagine that you're not enraged. When you go, you pay a lot of money, especially, bro, you're an international student, man. You're paying a lot of money, and you're out of state, So, and you're not enraged at the fact that all you're being asked to do is get your notebook out and take notes. No critical thinking. Like, if you're not enraged, it's almost like, oh my God, you've died already. Like, you've died. Like, you're dead. It's all over.
I also think that something that's special about this class in critical thinking is, well, I've wanted to check my phone probably 1,000 times since sitting up here, but what's special with this class is that you really enforce like the no phones, and I find that I'm on my phone all the time. We all are, and sitting today in econ, I'm on my phone, and I'm like, I feel like I'm wasting away my money.
Yeah,
but
you should be, because you are.
It's true, but then we all have the normal tendencies to be like, I have to go on my phone, I have to check this.
Yeah,
like,
well, why wouldn't you be on your phone? And there are any number of things on your phone that are far more interesting than taking notes in a class that you don't need. I mean, I encourage you, it's like, look, don't be on your phones, because we're going to try to make this really interesting. If you get on your phones, then I lose my passion to try to make it more interesting than what's on your phones. And what is on your phones is the world, man. You know what I mean? Like, you can watch videos about astrophysics, which are far more interesting than anything that I could talk about in this class. But okay, let me ask you this question.